So this is a cartoon I always like to start with because I feel like it describes my class in particular really well, because I've gone through like this kind of transition in teaching. So again, I teach science, and so when I'm talking about stuff like airplanes flying and how the wings work, and so when I fly, I like to sit near the wing because I'm just a dork, because I think about this and I smile. But you've got that kid in the back or that kid in the front who asks a really, really, really good question, right? And most of the time, where do we land, right? We land kind of in the middle here, where we don't always have time to talk about it, and we just kind of brush it off to the side, and we hope that maybe someday we can get back to it. What I want to posit to you today is that by using Camtasia, which is what I use, we can always answer our students' questions. We can always get them to increase the interaction. We can get them encouraged, and we can get them excited about learning. And if you tell your students that Santa Claus is your parents, I mean, that's horrible. So please don't do that. But the point is that they have a choice, and that you've got a choice in what to do with your technology, right? This is an activity that I do with my students. And I hand out these cards at the beginning of the year. And so if you're looking at this already, you're thinking, hey, I see some patterns. Good, you're supposed to. So let's say you get the Pluto card. I want you to take 3 seconds and choose 3 other cards that fit with yours. So it'd be like if I handed these out, you had to group up. So okay, so everybody got their cards, right? So if you saw this group, all right, science teachers in the house. I see planets, but if you saw this, you're probably a parent. I don't have kids yet, so I don't think in Disney, but that's cool. Does it really matter which one you choose? Absolutely not. The fact is you had a choice, right? So most of our classrooms are starting to look something like this. And what I've been trying to tell people is that this classroom is no different than the one you had before computers. And it's not because the computers are changing, it is because they're all facing forward. There's all the focus is still on the teacher, but now instead of a notebook to pass, with the notes, now they can IM each other with a nice pretty blue screen. So, the pedagogy has not changed. The idea behind teaching is not changed because they're all still facing that one, hey. So what I want to see is I want to see classes move to this. And if you are lecturing in the entire class period, it's not going to work. There's no way you can provide a good learning experience in this physical setting if we're trying to act like this. So what I want to do today is I want to show you how I use TechSmith stuff to make my classroom like this. I've got flexible learning spaces. I've got kids who want to work alone. Great. I've got kids that want to work in groups. Great. I've got kids that want to stand. Great. I've got kids that want to lay down. Great. I can accommodate all of those needs, and I do that through the flipped classroom. So when I started teaching way back in 2009, that's 4 years now. I stood at the board and I taught, and I went to college for it, and I did 4 years in high schools and practicums, and I student taught, and I got good reviews, and I got good evaluations from principals, and my students gave me good evaluations, and what really got me is I had this beautiful bell curve. And I got my data back my first year, and I was like, yeah, awesome. I've got this huge, most of my kids made it through the course. I had some that did really well, and I had some that didn't do so hot, but that's okay because I fit the curve, right? But what this is showing me, and what I realize, is that I am actively ignoring half of my class. Okay? If we are looking at our kids on a bell curve, we're saying, okay, half of them are going to succeed and half are going to fail. So I was making this unconscious decision to really underserve half of my population. And so when I see bell curves now, I just want to cry. So I changed my perspective, and I looked at my class from above, and I looked at it from below. And this little guy lived in my classroom last year, and he would sit on your head, and he would sit on your shoulder, and he would crawl around on the desk. He would try and escape sometimes, but we were faster, so we would bring him back. But I had to look at things differently. I had to change my perspective from, talking at people, and you're all being so kind and listening. But I had to think about my students. What needs do I need to meet? And so by recording my lectures and throwing them onto the internet, the time my kids need me is not to stand and yak at them about science. Because if I was talking science, man, you'd really be in for it. But I can stand next to them now after they've gotten that yakking portion of it. They've gotten that little kernel of information, and now I can sit next to him and I can answer his question. He wants to know why airplanes fly upside down. I can answer that for him. The kid next to him could care less about airplanes flying upside down. I'm not going to talk about it with him because it doesn't matter to them. So I'm personalizing their education because I'm not taking the entire class time to lecture. So that's one. Number two, formative assessment. I would walk around with these half sheets of paper, and I would walk up to a student, and I use I can statements in my class, so I can name parts of a cell. It's an objective that they have to be able to meet. I would carry these around, and I would sit down with someone, and we would say, what objective do you want to talk about? And they would pick one that they've been working on, and then we would formatively go through, and I would give them pointed feedback on how they were doing in their learning. And ultimately what this actually turned into, I need to update this, is now they self-assess. So every day or every time they go through a lesson, they go through a form similar to this, and they give themselves a grade. And they say, Mr. Bennett, I think I'm a 4, and here's why. And they list the work that they've done, and they list the questions that they've answered, and then I can go to them and I can say, all right, show me, prove me. And the burden of proof is on my students. And they're choosing to do this, which is great. What's your name? What? Brooke, wouldn't you like to tell your teacher what your grade should be in your class? My students get to. Isn't that awesome? So, and it's because I'm not standing up and talking at my kids all day. I can walk around and I can sit next to them and I can tell them, or they can tell me what they're learning, and I can help them specifically. Number 3, assessment changes. Scantrons are on their way out. Bubble sheets have been around for a long time, and you know, I try not to give Scantron tests, but in reality we have to sometimes, so we try and, you know, fit the middle. But all of my assessments are now personalized, and my kids, they can do a video, they can make a poster, they can make a website. And I'm going to show you some examples of work that my kids have been able to do, choices that they made, and I wasn't, you know, coercing them into doing it, but because I'm not lecturing, because they had choice in what they were learning, because I'm recording my lectures, that's kind of what it goes back to, they're able to do whatever they want. So this is an example, this is called a choice board, and what this is, my students pick across, diagonal, or up and down, just like tic-tac-toe. And so I've got groups that would do, you know, this column, but then another group might not be interested, so they go across the bottom. And they can personalize their learning style, and this works them through molecular genetics. And if you're a biology teacher, molecular genetics is hard, and it's not fun, and it's boring. And so because I recorded my lectures, they were able to work through this, and I had kids asking me, hey, Mr. Bennett, can we do these top 2, but then we don't really want to make a poster because we're not artistic, so can we make a game instead? I had kids asking me to do something harder, which is awesome. And the other thing about this is when, you know, the first thing your kids do when you hand them like a choice grid, which one do they look for? Brooke, which one do you look for? The hard one? Well, oh, the art one. Okay, so art, but do you want to do like the hard one? No way. All my kids are looking at this saying, Mr. Bennett, there's no easy one on here. And I say, I know. And so what they get into is they get into really high level critical thinking and application and synthesis because I'm not lecturing. So you're seeing a pattern here? Good. So this is an example. I worked in South Korea for 2 years. I lived in Seoul. And I was there when the tidal wave, or when the tsunami ran into Japan, and it knocked out the nuclear reactors. So I had a Japanese student in my class, and he said, Mr. Bennett, I want to like tell other people about this. And you know, we were in Korea, so it was important regionally, but he wanted to tell other people about, you know, his country. And so I said, great. How? What would you like to do? And he said, well, I like Photoshop, so can I make an infographic? And I said, sure. And we were doing nuclear chemistry at the time, talking about nuclear reactors and atoms and, you know, atomic bombs and stuff like that. And so he made this. I said, sure, let's do it. When am I going to see it? And he said, I'll give it to you in a week. And so he did this. He paired up with another group, and they put out a 5-page newsletter on the nuclear power, the nuclear problem, tsunami in Japan. Crazy, right? So this is another one. I had a student, her name was Jean, and she was more of a biology-minded person like myself, but she was in my chemistry class, and so she said, Mr. Bennett, you know, I get the chemistry and that's all fun, but I like biology more, and I've always kind of wondered, like, does smelling have anything to do with chemistry? Like, she was interested in why people smell stuff, right? And I said, I think so. I don't know. Yeah. And so instead of taking a test for that particular chapter, she took what she had learned on her own through the videos, through the practice problems, and through everything I'd given her, and she put together a website on this study of osmics, which is the scientific study of smell. I did not know about this. She did not know about it, but now she's the expert, and I can point to Jean and say, hey, like, go ask my student. She chose to learn this because I gave her the time. The third one, in November, December, January of this year-ish, Facebook pages were kind of all the rage. Everyone wanted to do a fake Facebook page, and the English teachers were tired of them because they got so many Facebook biographies on authors. And so I had kids come up and they said, Mr. Bennett, can we do a Facebook page? And I said, sure. How? we were doing bacteria, and they say, well, we want to make a Facebook page on bacteria. And so they picked E. coli, and they made a Facebook page for E. coli. And this is just one page, right? They had 4 pages for this thing. They had a wall, they had flair, they gave it badges, like, for people it made sick, like, you know, they gave it, like, the infectionator badge when they made 50 people sick. They had conversations between other bacteria that live in your stomach going on the wall. And this, I heard this yesterday. So its favorite music, it says Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr. I did not understand that. I was just like, yeah, it's the Rat Pack. E. coli is transmitted by rats. I mean, so these kids are doing high-level critical thinking because I'm giving them time to do it. I mean, I love this. And I got like 15 Facebook pages from kids because they saw this one and they're like, ooh, I want to do that. And so my kids are making a decision to be creative, which is so cool. And so the first, you know, I try and change my space, and I talked about it at the beginning, right? If your class is facing forward, you're not going to change, and that's just my personal belief, plain and simple. This is a school in Australia, and I've met the principal of this building, and I hope someday I can go visit his school because it is amazing. They have kids working together. They've got 4th graders teaching 8th graders. They have English teachers teaching history students. So these kids, they're in this building, and everyone's just kind of around in the space that they need to be in, and teachers are flowing through the room, and it's very organic, and it's natural, and they're giving kids the time to be creative and to make decisions. So what does this have to do with TechSmith? Here's a little pitch. And I don't pitch software or companies because I'm not a salesman. That's why I'm a teacher. So TechSmith believes in teachers, which is amazing. They're one of the few companies that I've found that does that. That's why I like to talk about their stuff. So I use a program called Camtasia Mac. And if you've ever used iMovie, you can use Camtasia Mac. And I record my lectures, and I sift it off to the internet, and so in class I can do all that fun stuff that I just showed you. And it's not, and I'm not trying to say this is like an easy process, but it's something that will transform your teaching, and these guys are on board with that, which is amazing because we need more people to listen to teachers, and they're willing to do that.